Hello, my brothers. I had a fun time yesterday at the flying field. Alvin was there when I got there, and he stayed long enough to film the maiden. Then he had an appointment at 2:30. Then I stayed until shoot 7, I want to say. And yeah, it was 70 degrees, and um, yeah, pleasant. No flies and no guys. And I put up 7 flights after Alvin left. So I haven't flown a DA 120 in 10 years or so. And my impression today is different than the impression I had then. Um, let's see, so where do I start? One, it I never even checked the needles on it. Used to be that DA always pre-ran their motors. I'm not sure they did on this one or not, but sometimes I get lazy on checking the needles for stock setting, and I always figure I'm gonna figure it out when I start it up. You know, if it doesn't start, maybe it came from the factory, from Walbro with the needles closed or something, and open them up. And if it's running too rich, lean it out. If it's running too dry, fatten it up. So yeah, I just figure I'll deal with it. But it is kind of lazy. Like you should probably always should check to see if you're on stock needle settings. But I didn't check, and it fired right up. And yeah, I just took and primed it by spinning the prop with my hand like this back and forth on compression. I'd bang it, compression, bang it, compression. Let's see, I'm trying not to hit the wood right here, but yeah, see, I bang compression, then bang compression the other way. I did that for like a minute or two, and then I turned on the ignition and planned on flipping it till it popped. I think because I primed it, it was like the first flip, it popped, and then I opened the choke, and then I think it was 2 flips. The thing started up and ran perfect. So I don't think I touched the needles. Oh, that's not entirely true. That story is pretty true, but just as like a general principle thing, like half lazy but not completely lazy. When the motor was on the bench, I just took and opened up the high and the low needle like a 16th. At a general principle, without even checking them. So it's like lazy, but not 100% lazy. Anyway, it ran fine, like ran good, but it wasn't dry. You could even first start brand new, just sitting there. You could, where's my thumb? Thump the throttle, fast, and it would transition. It wouldn't dry out or cough at all. So I go, it's pretty good. But I'll tell you a little secret. I think, after I got 36 planes the last 3 years, but then I've got 25 years of planes. I think when the motors are brand new, all the motors, DLE, everybody, GP, DA, when they're brand new, they'll tolerate a little bit extra abuse, like the first flight or two, like being too lean or being too rich, because they're new, but you shouldn't run them that way. So yeah, it wasn't running too clean anyway. It was running strong. And so you saw the maiden video, and I didn't baby it per se. I don't usually baby them, but I didn't keep it in like a crankshaft type maneuver, just bogging and full throttle, hovering around type of thing, like bogged down type of thing, so. But the big thing I do, I don't know about you guys, but I watch other guys and they make me nervous on their maidens or new, used plane they pick up and they don't know what's going on with it yet, but it may look like I'm just kind of everywhere to somebody who's standing there with me and not that concerned about a brand new motor, but I'm actually quite concerned every second. So I either have the altitude or the airspeed to get to the threshold. on the correct side into the wind. So I'm always cognizant of that. And, I either have the altitude or the airspeed. So if I'm low, and especially if I'm, going away from the threshold, where I'm going to have to loop around to hit it if I don't want to land downwind, if I'd prefer to, naturally I prefer to land into the wind, especially when it's blowing like 10, 12 knots like it usually is at PV Mac in the afternoons. I want to land into the wind. So I may be low, but I'm pretty much full throttle. I have a lot of speed, and I am like buzzing around the threshold side for the most part. Like I rarely get too far on the, the downwind leg, or the into the wind leg really, so that you have to go downwind to get to the threshold. Or I'm, high enough that it doesn't matter. Well, even high enough, you got to make sure you can get the threshold into the wind. So I'm very aware of those things. Sometimes I just fly that side of the box, right side or left side, depending on which way the wind's blowing. And then that way I'm where I need to be, in quick order. So that's kind of how I do it. And then, I try not to do like blenders and tip spins and like sustained, crankshaft type moves where you're really bogging the motor and, being full throttle even without much movement, because you're stalled out and you're really honking on it. So, try to avoid that stuff that's going to overheat it. And so that's kind of my strategy. Not that you asked. So, it went super well. Then, I have a couple checks when I land, when the motors are new. And, like one of the first things, even in the air, like I check, I used to get into all the telemetry sensors on temp and stuff, but I don't get into that anymore. And we could talk about that forever. And there's some guys that are into it, and they'll have big arguments, but I've done it all too. And I've tried all the locations and everything. And, if you want to know, I think we run like between 300 and 360 on a good motor that's running right in the air. You're running 300 degrees to 360 degrees. You're really, if you got it running good, it'll be 300. If you do, pop top to flat spin to Harrier landing, if you have an infrared gun, temp it, you'll be like on a well broken in good motor, you'll be like 200, and if you do, a flat casual final where, you're slowing down and you're nice and flat and everything, then I'll shoot them with an infrared gun at like 160, even 150, even less, 140 sometimes, 135. I've gotten, on a well broken in motor that you do wheels landing, a casual landing. So that's kind of a barometer for me. And, I really don't want to see anything much over 200 on a normal wheels landing, non-Harrier, final approach, quarter speed, that kind of stuff where your motor has a good chance to cool off. So, but I'll use, versus, like I said, telemetry, I will use my senses. So if the plane's coming by me, which I do a lot when I fly, I get it pretty close to me. Not even necessarily in hovering, I'll just fly really close to me because I'm smelling it, So if I smell a little burnt smell, then I know I'm getting too hot. When I land, I'll always, I don't need all these gauges. I just touch the cowl, If the cowl's hot, then I'm too hot, If the cowl is just, lukewarm, then that's really what I'm after. But I can smell it, and I can feel it. So I more go on that, and the way that it runs. So when I did land, and you didn't ask me any of that either, that's just like a long story. But when I landed on the Maiden, I shot it, and it was the hottest fin I could find. And you guys got to look around, because I found plenty of fins that were 120, 130. Most of the fins were like 180, but I found one spot on one fin that was 205. And that's what I'm looking for, is the hottest spot on the hottest fin. And that's a lot hotter than I wanted. And so even though it was running really good, transitioning good, full throttle good, and, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, still a new motor, and 205 is on a wheels landing. is more than I want. It's more than normal for me. Like a brand new motor, first flight like that, a break-in flight, is usually like 185, sometimes less, sometimes 165. And depending on how I've done the baffle, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But yeah, 205, it's kind of pushing it. Now the DLEs tend to be up there around 205, but even those, if you baffle them right, and run them rich enough, you can land a first flight on those at 185. So, I wanted to do something about that. I couldn't do anything about the air circulation at the field, and I wanted to get some gas through it to break it in, so I just richened it up. So I took it out an eighth of a turn on the low and an eighth of a turn on the high, and like I said, I'd already taken out 16th on each in the shop. And now, it didn't like bog and gurgle, chug, not bog, but chug and gurgle bad or anything. But I could tell, it wasn't quite, as smooth. But still, it was still pretty darn good. But then I landed and I was getting 95 on like the next 2 or 3 flights. And then I actually richened both needles up another 16th or so. So that'd be a quarter turn on each from however they were set when I got it, which I never checked out of laziness and everything else. And then I was landing at 85, 185, which I got a feeling is about as good as I can get. And I'll explain to that in a minute. So that was what I did. The motor was great the whole time, and by like the third flight, I was torque rolling on the runway. Fourth flight, I was doing slow Harrier rolls a foot high down the runway. Alvin was gone, of course, and the slow Harrier rolls, that's when you're really gonna find out. And there's other even worse things you can do, but then I'm idling a lot, and in high alpha. So, so I usually won't do those for a while, and but I felt real good about the motor, and I took it all the way through 8 flights. But the other thing I was noticing, the other thing I always check the temp, and then the other thing I always check is the fuel. So, if I've got the needle set right, and the motor's breaking in, I'm going to use more fuel than after the break-in. And I want that, I don't want it to be miserly at break-in. But it was pretty miserly, but as I richened it up, like I said, a total of a quarter turn out on each by the time I was done, high and low, it got less miserly, but it's still pretty miserly, which gets to another interesting thing. So I was getting, I got a 33-ounce tank, and I was getting 11 minutes with a solid eighth of a tank left. A very comfortable amount of gas left. And that was after, riching it up, all that extra richness. And having the motor get looser. See, it's, can you see that it's nice and loose now? It was, real stiff when I started. A lot of drag, and now it's getting really pretty loose. Not as loose as it will get in another 10 flights, but definitely pretty easy to flip around, pretty loose. I got to 11 minutes, and that's kind of surprising, so, but that's what's interesting. That's another interesting point I was talking about, is it does seem to be miserly, and there are motors that are opposed to motors that aren't. I think it's like all exhaust porting, because I've used the same reeds and the same carb, like the exact same reeds and the exact same carb on 170cc class motors from 3 different brands, and they all get, and they're tuned perfect, and they run great, and they have awesome power and idle great and transition great, all 3 of them, and from 3 different brands, and they use dramatically different amounts of fuel. The GP 178 compared to the DLE 170, it's crazy how miserly the DLE is, and from in my opinion, the DLE 170 is it has more power. Like all mine have had more power, and I've had you know probably 6 of each or 8 of each. I think I've had 8 of each of those motors. And even though the GP has like that low end grunt, really the GP's it's got more power. It's faster. It has more RPMs, and so then no slide on GP or whatever, but this is just an interesting thing about the fuel efficiency miserly thing, which just gets you to thinking about things. And those are the motors that I actually swapped the reeds and the carb on. So same reed, same carb. And so you're like, how come it's so much more efficient? It's lighter and has more power, So you're like, whoa, what's going on here? But I I'm not a 2-stroke engineer, but I just keep thinking it's exhaust boring. But it is interesting that these different motors are more efficient with fuel than others. So the DLE 170 is super efficient with fuel, and this, from all I can tell from my short experience right now, and I was running these motors 10 years ago too. I was running GP 123s and DA 120s 10 years ago when I was flying then. And but I don't remember the miserly part. But I'm guessing that these are miserly. And then, but even the DA 170s are not miserly, but the DA 150s are pretty miserly. So it's just interesting. I think it's porting. And then, and all my GP 123s, I don't go for much more than 9 minutes because I'm getting down to 1/8 of a tank. But on this, I can go 2 minutes more. But then I remember them being, and they are lighter. I think if my pictures and documentation is right, they're like 8 ounces lighter, which for these planes is great for me because versus the old days, all these have shorter tail moments now, so that they tumble better and cartwheel better. And so I always add lead. Unless I have 2 servos on the rudder, I always strap on some lead to the tail wheel. And I always put the batteries in the back. We'll get to the batteries too. And then, even with the batteries in the back, I still got to strap on tail weight on the tail. And then, but with this lighter motor in the front, I'm at a neutral CG right now. On a 45-degree upline, I just stay right on that inverted. I just stay right on that line. It doesn't tuck either way. So, and it felt really good. CG felt really good. It's not precision nose heavy at all. It's not IMAX setup at all. But it's not old school 3D either, where the tail just tucks underneath it. It's a very neutral balance, and I got that without putting the lead on the tail because the motor's light. Long story short, long story long, I'm finally getting to the punchline. I remember it being, because I had them even out there at the same time 10 years ago at the field. I'd have a plane with a GP and a plane with a DA 120, and I remember them being just a bit softer, like to where it was you could fly the crap out of it no problem, but you could tell, and I definitely could not tell. Like this thing just was a bottle rocket. I don't know if this plane's particularly light or whatever, but then, I've watched Jace and all the sponsor pilots that fly DA, and they're always, watch Jace rifle roll with the DA 120. It's not going slow. I think Spencer flies them too. I know Kim Cornette does. And they're always honking. I've noticed that, for years. And, and this one was too. This was like pulling hard, and it's brand new. It's barely started to break in, but I definitely could feel the break in. Like most of these motors at 1.5 gallons, to me, it makes like 70% of the initial break in, or maybe 80%, and then over the next 25 flights, then you get that 100% break in. But I felt it come to life, on like the 4th and 5th flight, and got better, on 6th, 7th, and 8th flights. But the whole time since the first flight it was really honking. So, that was pretty good. Very easy day with that motor. And every time it started the same way I start my GPs. Like I pretty much start all engines, the DLEs too. Once I've done the first start of the day, which is usually for me what I'll do, it depends on how long the planes have been sitting too. If I flew the plane yesterday and it's my first flight of the day, I'll leave the ignition off and I'll close the choke and I'll do 2 aggressive flips to prime it. Then I'll open the choke, turn the ignition on, and 1 flip will start it. If I haven't flown in a month, I'll do 3 flips, on closed choke. And yeah, if it's the same day, and it was like within a half an hour, I'll do like a lazy flip on the prime. If it was like an hour ago, I'll do an aggressive flip on the prime. So usually if you see me go to the starting station and start my plane, it'll be 2 flips, 1 prime and 1 start. So I never do, or only in like, if, I don't know where the priming is in a plane because somebody else has been trying to start it or something. If you see me go to the starting station, you'll see generally 2 flips, so I'll just do a choke close prime, and then the next flip will start the engine. If you wait till it pops, you'll know that you're primed and you'll know your ignition's working because it popped and everything, but then it'll take 4 or 5 flips after that to start it. And that's not hard, and I need the exercise, but that's not even cool. But to me, the coolest thing too is just to have, I've always liked the choke servo the best, but I'm just too lazy to put them in. And then, they get a little more tricky when you have smoke to have the clearances and everything, but still easy. But because then, yeah, you just flip it until it pops, and then when it pops, and I always put the choke servo on a momentary switch. So I hold the momentary switch with my left hand, and then I flip it with my right, and when it pops, I let go of the momentary switch on my left hand, and then the choke opens and it just keeps running. And that's pretty cool, but I'm too lazy. So, yeah, point being, 22 minutes in, is that it was super easy all day. From the first start was super easy, kind of surprisingly easy. It went so quick, it got primed so quick. And then, yeah, it wasn't finicky all day. It was 2 flips all day. 1 prime and 1 to start it up. And to me, what helps a lot with that is to avoid any vapor locking and stuff, finicky motors, is I have a portable fan, DeWalt fan, and I set it up blowing on the motor on high every time I land. So if I want to fly even 5 minutes between flights, which is pretty fast, my motor's already cooled down, to like 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So it keeps it from being finicky. So that's something I like to do. So that's how the motor ran. The motor was super cool, or not cool because it was 185, but it was trouble-free, super powerful, super light. Everything was dialed about it. So on that point, I don't think I ever would have got the 205 on the first flight, regardless of needles, and I wouldn't be getting 185 on the last flights, even though it was breaking in and reaching up. I think it all would have been lower, like I'm more accustomed to. I think it's this setup. I was talking about it in the prior video. The baffle, I don't like how they've changed what they're doing on the baffle from what they used to do. Yeah, I'm trying to get the good angle there. But you can see how much room to the side of the cylinder. Plus, a lot of the cylinder there is blocked off. This is the side that's really blocked off. So if the inside of the cylinder towards the crankshaft, it's covered, so it doesn't get any air. And then past the cylinder, you see this huge hole, and there's a huge hole down too. And this, yeah, so that type of stuff. So yeah, like I was saying in the other video, they used to do foam, and they did it a pretty extended deep piece, and then you just trimmed it, and then the air had no choice but to go. If you trimmed it right, the air would go pretty much only up and over the engine and not down. And there's a reason for that. You want to cool the whole engine, but You don't, the big thing to me that I've learned that makes a huge temperature change is not to have the air stuck up here. So if you have the hot air stuck up here, and the reason that happens is these big gaps like that, where the air is going to take the path of least resistance. So with these big gaps and these big holes in the bottom and the big holes on the side, it's not going to even care about cooling the motor. It's just going to care about getting out, you know. And you got the negative air pressure dam, so the air is being drawn out, and it's just going to suck all that air right past the engine. Now, some of the air, of course, is going to go up top and cavitate, but then it's going to be it's on a positive air pressure instead of a negative air pressure. That air rushing by here, you know, from these openings down into the exit is going to have the strong flow. So it's just going to have positive pressure up here that's just holding that hot air above the cylinders on the cowl and not letting that air out and not cooling the motor. So that happens if you don't do the baffles right to begin with. But then we got another little situation here. They made a massive hole. Look at that. You can see the entire carb with sides around the carb, and it's just a huge hole. Now you do need a hole for air intake for the carb, or you're going to vapor lock, and you'll like if you seal this over, you'll just flame out. You know, you'll, that's a jet term, but you'll dead stick. You know, your engine will stop turning because gas boils at a very low temperature. So yeah, you're gonna have problems. So we always have these air intakes that are scale and everything, not scale in size, but you know, in appearance. But that one is just way too big. So that doesn't affect the, that's great for the carburetor, you know. But what it does is it's just more air that's flowing strongly through the bottom of the cowl. So everything here is making the air flow from the bottom of the cowl through. So the air is not getting drawn out from a negative air pressure at the top. It's actually from this big hole and these big side holes. It's getting a very good stream of air, very strong, powerful. Imagine a bunch of wind through here, and that's just pressing all that air up. It's not getting drawn out. So yeah, you can make these, you know, about the size of a quarter is about all the bigger you need. I mean, I really think you could make them the size of a nickel. I've done that before. But you definitely want it, though, and you want it directed over the carb to cool it. But I'm going to get rid of, you know, like 70% or 80% of the size of that hole. And then I've got to take, and I said I was going to do this before the maiden on the other videos, but I didn't. I've got to fill these sides, and then I've got to close the bottom. You know, so I always want the bottom, where is that? I always want the bottom baffle to hit the motor. So, you know, I do want some air to go down there, but it's already natural for that to be a place that's drawn because it's next to the exit, you know, which is pulling air hard. So the lower air is going to get out. It's the upper air you want to make sure to get out. So if you make the bottom of the baffle tight and you close off the sides tight too, these big gaps through here, you got to close all this stuff off. And you can actually leave the top, you know, a quarter inch or so away, you know, from the motor. And yeah, then your air is going to go up and over. And then if you don't have these big holes and you don't have these places for it to blow through, then that negative air pressure, what would we call that? Lip. It's going to, you can see it right there. Yeah, that's going to draw. The air is going to get drawn out from that negative, from that lip. And it's gonna have a vacuum. It's gonna have a suction. It's gonna want to pull some air, and if the only air to pull is the air that's sitting on top of the motor, then that's when your motor gets cool. Like I've done all the experimenting with this, and it's dramatic, you know. And so if when I decrease the size of that carb cooling hole and I do this baffling right, I would guess it's going to go down 30 degrees Fahrenheit on landing. What that means to the guys that are really into the telemetry and where they put the sensor, under the spark plug, on the hottest fin, blah, 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 blah. I've done all that stuff. For the guys who really understand what the temperatures actually are, in the air, I'd say it's closer to like 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the air. So probably a motor that was running 340 during flight, at its hottest point in flight, would be running 290 in flight if that circulation system was taken care of the way that I just outlined. So I've tested all this stuff. It's pretty dramatic. And you could tell, even if you don't have any testing devices with you, you can smell it, you can feel it, like the cow's so much cooler because that air is getting out, and the motor sounds better, runs better. You don't smell anything hot or burny, And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I know a couple of yokels. One of them down here in SoCal, and not at my field though, and who insists that baffling makes no difference. Yeah, that's why they do it in full-scale planes, you numbnuts. It makes a tremendous difference if you do it right. It makes just a huge difference. I really like baffles like these that are on here. I honestly don't think that these help even 1 degree over no baffles. I actually believe that's true. It's just not helping at all. It might be hurting, but it's not helping. It has to be set up to where all the air goes up top of the cylinders and gets drawn out, the bottom. It's got to be a negative air pressure. It's got to be sucking on that air that's on top of the cylinders. Okay, I think I said enough about that. So yeah, I plan on doing those mods, and I plan on landing and have this thing be 155 instead of 185, and I believe that's 100% doable. I've done it many times before. And then some guys will go, oh, it doesn't matter if you're shooting on the ground after you land. Yes, it do. Because it's a gauge. It's just a gauge. We're not talking about the temperature in the air. I already told you what the temperature in the air is. But if you land, and I've helped guys, that their motors are running hot, and if you land on a nice wheel landing, a flat approach at low speed, and you shoot the motor and it's 260, 270, then you are hot as hell in the air. If you land and it's 135, which is not unusual for me on a broken motor, then it was not hotter than hell in the air. But it's just a gauge. It's just a barometer. It's just something to use to check your temps. Does it tell you your temp in the air? No. But, if you want to get all into that, then be my guest. But I've already been there. I already know what's going on. And I just want to, keep it simple, stupid. So these things I didn't like in assembly, and they're on the elevators too. And, I was like trying not to break them and use my fingernails and use a tool and stuff. Turns out I got along with them really good. Once you do it a couple times, and I'm not using a tool anymore. I'm just using my fingernail, and I think it's my thumbnail, and I just push it just a tad bit, and it works because I've broken these things before. Not the same brand, but and then that's no fun. So I'm getting along with those good. That was one of the things that I wondered about. And then one of the commenters said he knew somebody who did this, and they vibrated out right away. I fell in love with these today, and I had some rundown batteries, so I had to change packs at least once. And it was so easy to plug and unplug, and it has no strain on the receiver, because that's its own line that I soldered up and bolted on. But I didn't know how it would give you too much trouble, at least not done this way, because it's a solid mount and it's a solid receiver.
connector, and it's got 3mm bolts, one on each side, that are blue Loctited in. Like, basically, this wood's going to have to be ripped to shreds, before that connector would fail. So I never saw how it could be a problem, and it certainly was not today. And I don't see, I worry about pretty much any other thing on this plane before I worried about that. So on any of our planes, like, yeah, that ain't going nowhere, as they say. So that's no problem, and that worked out great. I really like that. And then I got along with these two. These are like the Extreme Flight. I shot them all with some WD because they're all sticky. And I just shoot them all with some WD. I know some guys will say you should use dry lube, and probably true. I didn't have my dry lube with me, but some reason I always shoot these with WD even when I have the dry lube. But, and then they last, like, yeah, those have been on there for almost 3 years now with the WD. But yeah, once you free them up, then they slide back and forth pretty easy. But it's pretty funny too, like, another interesting thing, like, I've gotten rid of a lot of planes the last 3 years because they had screws, and they were killer planes, like my Aeroworks kit, extra 330, yeah, 40%. I mean, it's the best 40% I've ever flown, and it was like new, and it was super rad, and I, did all the work on the bevels and covering and everything else, and it has screws. So once you use this, the slides, you just don't want to do the screws. And Skywing, and I have 2 or more Skywing planes now that use the magnet pins, and those are way better than screws and really not any trouble. But now Skywing's gone to these sliders, and you can't miss what you never had or whatever. But yeah, I just want sliders on everything. You get so lazy. But yeah, all these sliders work good. I didn't have any issues at all. And then on the plane itself, first thing was, and I've been saying in the videos lately that I've sworn off Skywing, which I have, because quality control, customer service. But this is the best. Ironically, this is the best quality control by far of any of the Skywing planes I ever had. And the Skywing planes to me 3 years ago were much better than the ones the last couple years. But especially, like, I think the yellow one I got a little over a year ago, like 14 months ago. That's when I started getting bad ones. But yeah, they really stepped it up on here. I've never owned a Skywing, not one, that I didn't have to spend almost an entire day sanding the inner wing tubes. I never sand the tube itself, because I consider them structural. But I'll sand the inner wing tube, and I have to sand the wings for like 2-3 hours per wing. I'll have to sand the stab receivers. I'll have to sand this receiver, and it just takes forever. Because you want to be careful with. They're very, very thin. So if you sit there and put something on a drill, let's say, or something, and then you just totally, just wipe it out. So that's always been a huge nightmare with Skywing, and the fit and finish on this was, almost as good as like a Model Power. Well, it's as good as Extreme Flight because I've never had to do anything with the Extreme Flight tubes. But yeah, Skywing, every single one, and I've had a lot of Skywings, and it's so much work, and they didn't have that. And yeah, all the pre-wiring, not only do you get extensions for everything, the throttle extension, I didn't buy one extension for this plane. Throttle extension, aileron extensions, elevator, rudder extensions, they're all included, and they're all in place, and they're all labeled, and they all have clamp connectors on them so that you don't have to do anything else. So yeah, that all worked good. There's a reason I said that, and I already forgot because I keep forgetting things. But yeah, just the quality control. Now, the big issue I had with the quality control was 2 things. One, they were starting to get not even be able to jig the ailerons up with on plane with the wing. And then of course the glue was the big thing on the last one, where the glue completely failed on one side of a hinge, and the other side was solid. All the hinges were solid on one side, had to be glued a different day, and then they glued the aileron on a different day, you know, put them together and with different glue, because all that glue was just like bazooka bubble gum, you know, it just wiped right off. So that failed in flight. And I was doing demos for 200 kids at an airport in Riverside, you know, and you didn't want to be having an aileron failure at that time, you know, and so that was exciting. And I, you know, risked the plane because I landed it way out in a grass field with holes and stuff, because I could have tried to land it. I had enough control to land it by us on the runway, but the kids were close by, you know, so yeah, that was all a bad scene with Skywing. But I still don't know if all the glue is good on here, but through 8 flights, the glue is good. On that plane, it was 20 flights before that glue blew out. But, you know, hopefully the glue is good here, but all that long story, no clicks of trim is all I'm trying to get at. That's very rare. Even for extreme flight or everything, I'd say I don't know that's ever really happened. Only my kit builds. Only the kits are 0 clicks of trim. So, yeah, Alvin was there when I got there, and Rick, and then they both left like within 15-20 minutes, but they're like, how are you flying it like that so quickly? Are you thumbing it because you didn't trim it? And I go, no, there's nothing to trim. So that was nice too. Like, I started on a new model for this, so everything, all the mixes, everything's from scratch, you know, for rates and expos and idle down and the telemetry I set up and the timers and everything. I didn't have to adjust anything, like idle up, idle down, like everything was perfect on it, but also not one click of trim, and the thing's just dead neutral. So that was pretty darn cool. So pretty successful on, you know, the quality of this plane. And then characteristics wise, you know, it's an extra. Extras are my favorite. I call this one an Edgestra because it does have some edge characteristics, but it flies a lot like an extra, the Extreme Flight Edge. So this compared to the Skywing NG, you know, it's going to fly very similar. Like if you grab it, it flies very similar. It's a 104-inch extra from Skywing. It flies very similar to the NG. But it is different, like, but not radical. Not like the difference between an extra and an edge or cap or something. Like, it's just very subtly different than the NG. One of the things it does really well, it would have been so fun to have videos, but we'll get them sometime. I was doing, you know, wing slap to square turns, you know, rudder, knife edge walls, I call them. They call them wing slaps, but so I was doing a box, you know, and everything, and then doing wing slaps from each direction and stuff. And I was doing it very low and very perpendicular, you know, squared up to the ground and stuff. And it does them really well. It locks in really good, and it doesn't have any real tendency to balloon up or down. If you look at me with the Skywing NG, you'll see that I have full rudder deflection down to the ground when I'm in the apex of a wing slap, which is, you know, a little nervy until it proves it to you that it's never going to go into the ground. But yeah, to come out straight and level, I have full opposite rudder, you know, on the NG. But on this edge, it's like a dream, and this one may even be easier than the edge. In all the other maneuvers, it does good, and it's an extra, and it's a Skywing, like, it's fine. But you know, it has a little subtle tendencies different than the NG, the way that it does everything. The elevators are super effective, even though I got 3 degrees less than I normally get, but they're bigger elevators, you know, and the tail moment maybe is a little shorter, I'm not sure, but it just is, they're very effective elevators, and yet the tail doesn't sink under in Harrier rolls as easily as it does on the NG, but the NG elevators are not as effective. So in everything, it just feels a little bit different. It feels a little bit different in inverted Harriers. The snaps, probably more predictable. I was doing a lot of snaps the next 7 flights after Alvin left, but they looked real clean, more predictable. It seems to keep its heading a little bit better. But it, like the first flight, I hardly noticed a difference between it because it's a Skywing Extra, you know. Another guy asked about, and I got an update on that too. He asked about Nordlocks for the mufflers. And I know a lot of guys at the flying field that have trouble with mufflers coming loose on these 120cc and other motors too. And I always talk about the Nordlocks. He wanted to know what size. I don't have the Granger or McMaster-Carr book right here. A few things. That one, there's different brands and they're not all as good, although they all work. But the actual Nordlocks to me work best. And then I've got them in the stainless steel, and I don't like those as good either. I like the hardened steel better. But for our mufflers on the 120cc class, they're 5mm bolts. And so you just got to find the size that is a minimum of 5mm for the bolt to go through. But you see here these are both 5mm, but you see a very big difference in the OD, the outside dimension. And in a lot of the other brands of 120cc, I had to get these small OD to fit down with the muffler bolt in the tube. And then some of them recently have modified their mufflers again, and you can't get any washer down there. You can't get even these small OD. It just gets the Allen head. It's just barely gets in. Like, that's it. So with the DA, what was cool, and I really was excited for a minute, but it's still, I'm totally stoked, is of the 4 bolts, 2 of them I was able to use the full size, these silver ones on the right, 5mm with the wide OD, and they went on no problem. I think that's the muffler on the right, this side right here. And but oddly enough, I thought, the muffler on the left's not much different. It has tubes as well. It's got 2 tubes. The one on the right has 1 tube. And they get stuck. And then it took me like 2 minutes to get it out. So they need these small OD. So 5mm ID and the small OD. So, yeah. That guy wanted to know what size to get. Well, they're 5mm, and then yeah, if you're DA, you're going to need 2 small OD and you can use all small ODs, make it simple for yourself, or you can get 2 of the larger ODs and they will fit, and then you get more purchase. But even the small ODs are going to work. If you have another brand engine, sometimes Nordlocks will work, and sometimes they won't. Just depends on what mufflers you get and what brand. Shit, man. Is that cover it all? Is that enough? 48 minutes talking about the Maiden. But yeah, all the equipment was great. Had 0 issues. It was a beautiful day. No guys and no flies. Just enjoying my time out there. And yeah, everything went like clockwork. It's amazing how good all this stuff is anymore. I don't seem to remember it going this well 25 years ago. Even the, accomplished unlimited IMAC pilots and stuff with new planes would always be struggling. Couldn't even get them to run. Trouble with servos, hard overs, everything like that. And nowadays, and for quite a few years too, like it's freakish if something goes wrong. Like, you just pretty much expect everything's always going to go good. And yeah, it was like that. Very successful. I think I don't like these tail wheels as well. That's a little thing. You see how the Extreme Flight, it's got a swept back, and so it gets good ground handling and it doesn't bounce around. These Skywing changed. They had more of a flat leaf, and I would have to change to a Dubro tire all the time. Like in the other garage, you could see I've done it to most of them. But they all have that swept back. But you see here, this has this 90-degree down housing off of the carbon fiber leaf. It's a 90 degree. It doesn't sweep back at all. So it kind of tends to want to bounce around, jump around, like it's under more leverage for abuse to itself. And if there's a little wind or something hits it, like, yeah, kind of wants to pop up the ground and be a little more trouble. So what can I say? These are nicer because they rake them back a bit, so it's going to be better. This being perpendicular to the ground like that with its horseshoe housing is not ideal. That's probably my only thing that I would say about Skywing on this plane. And then I just hope that glue holds. Yeah, that's pretty much my story. Like 1 hour to tell you guys about the day. All right, out.